Welcome back, everyone. This is the Story Impact Author Interview Podcast, and I'm your host, Lisa Towles. What does it mean to seek justice? Not just in a courtroom, but across generations, across grief, across the current of violence of a society that fails its most vulnerable. In New York City, where power and poverty coexist on the same block, where veterans sleep in building basements and leaders make impossible choices, the search for truth is never simple. My guest today, Karen E. Osborne, writes directly into that complexity. Her award-winning novel, Justice for Emerson, is a dual timeline murder mystery that moves between tumultuous 1968 and the shifting sands of the present, weaving a Vietnam veteran's journey through war, addiction, and redemption with a present-day discovery that sets off a riveting investigation. Karen's fiction is grounded in decades of real-world experience in philanthropy, nonprofit leadership, and service, and it shows. Her characters are strong, flawed, and fully alive to the moral weight of the world around them. I'm excited to dig in today. Karen, warmest welcome.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Lisa.
Karen, you've said before that you kind of wanted to write for a long time, but you didn't start till more recently. And I'm curious, was there a particular catalyst that sort of ignited your creative spirit to say, yes, now it's time? Like, how did Aria first speak to you?
So that I wanted to write. I started writing at age 12, and in my high school yearbook, it says ambition. It says writer. And I was an English lit major in college, and I wrote bad short stories and bad poetry, you know. But life, and married, children, a big career. It took us to 5 continents, helping not-for-profits all over the world and all over the United States. And so I just kept putting my writing aside until these two women, Kara and Alex, started talking to me. And I mean, they would talk. I'd have to pull over the road and grab my notebook because these women are just talking to me and talking to me, and they'd have whole conversations. And I just had to start writing. And it's so funny because that book came out, Getting It Right, came out in 2017, excuse me, 2017. I was 69 years old. And then they started talking to me again. They started talking to me last year. And so I've rewritten and reimagined Getting It Right all over again.
Wow.
And writing a sequel to it.
Wow. The pulling over on the side of the road, I mean, it doesn't that, I mean, yes, that's very destabilizing in a way, but I mean, doesn't that flow just feel so good? I mean, being kind of a channel for these stories that live here, and they're like, yes, now it's time. You have to answer that call. That's so exciting to hear.
It is. It's a wonderful feeling. And, I'd sit on an airplane and I'd see somebody and I thought, oh my goodness, that's exactly how Vanessa looks. Alex's sister Vanessa. And so I'm scribbling down, I'm watching her mannerisms, I'm watching what she was doing. We just live, right? As writers, we live in this very real world,
Mhm.
but it's our real world of our imagination. It's very busy up here, very busy.
Yeah, a little too busy for me sometimes, but it's okay. I mean, like when I'm only doing the business of writing, I mean, you're also a podcaster like me. You're a writer and a podcaster, so when I'm just doing kind of the business of writing, but not actually fiction writing, not actually putting words on a page, there's like a something missing in my life. So yeah, I love that feeling too. One of the things that I did once, I was working for a company in South San Francisco Bay, and I had a ridiculously insane commute, like over 2 hours every day. And one of my books was coming to me on those commutes, and I used Siri to do verbal texting. And by the time I got home this one day, I had like 17 super like 8 paragraph long texts, and I just sent them to myself, and then I transcribed them. And there's something about like the the monotony of the road, especially like in California, where if you're on the freeway at 5 p.m., you're probably going 2 miles an hour. So there's something mind-numbing about that that lets something back here talk. Yeah, funny.
Exactly right. I wrote a lot on airplanes, in the Delta Lounge, in hotel rooms, because, yeah, exactly right.
Um, so let's talk about justice for Emerson. Arya finds Cal Emerson, a veteran and a volunteer, in a basement, a place physically and metaphorically below the surface of society. What made you decide to navigate the emotional weight of giving a voice to those who are often hidden in plain sight in our cities?
So my husband and I, along with a ministry of my church, we feed the hungry and unhoused every week. And this has been something that has been important to me for as long as I can remember. That you walk past people, you'd see people. I would just keep quarters in my car, and I'd roll down the window and roll back up the window as you pass people. And so this has mattered to me for a very long time. There's a scene in the book where a young woman who they're living in their car, mom and her two kids are living, they have jobs. They have jobs, but they can't afford the jobs. They're not paying enough. And she was talking about how hard it was to not have sanitary, um, tampons and how devastating that was because they weren't free back then. Now lots of places will provide it for free. So this was just an important segment of the world that I cared about. And I try in all my stories to lift social issues. The book isn't about the social issues. It's a page-turning murder mystery and with a lot of romance and all kinds of other stuff.
Mhm.
But I wanted people to see hungry, unhoused people, and so many of them are addicted.
Mhm.
So many are not, but there's an awful lot of them that are addicted.
Mm. Wow. Well, I love the fact um that you are aligning your vocation with your books. I mean, that's something that's like a kind of authenticity gem that you're bringing into your work. Yes, you're creating like high octane, fast-paced mystery thrillers, but it's also embodied with what I call your me factor, with what's important to you, like with the stories and the values that live in your heart. And I think that's what really matters to potential readers when they can see that you're bringing yourself into these books. I think that's awesome. So the dual timeline of Justice for Emerson anchors Cal's journey in 1968 on a very pivotal day in history, the day Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. What made you decide it was essential to tie a personal story of redemption to such a collective moment of national grief?
That came straight out of real life. So I am married for 58 years to my high school sweetheart. And that's what happened to him. I was busy protesting the Vietnam War, wearing my black armband and, out in the world. I was just, I was 19 and 18, 19 years old. And he was the draft. And he was drafted. He knew he was going to be drafted. And so he and his brother on the same day signed up for the Air Force because they didn't want to be drafted and spend the whole time in the mud. up to your necks in Vietnam. And so he was like, yeah, this is important and serving my country. And then that scene where Emerson finds out that Dr. King was murdered while he was over the Pacific on his way to Vietnam, that happened to Bob. And he was devastated. He thought, what am I doing here?
Mhm.
What why am I going to kill people that I don't have anything against when my country doesn't, it just changed his. Now, fortunately, he didn't then become an addict like poor Cal did. Bob came back whole, but an awful lot of our classmates, our high school classmates, all kinds of things happened to them. So I always fill my books with a lot. Somebody told me that they're very stuffed, but I hope that's in a good way. But I wanted to build on that moment in Bob's life,
Wow.
and then what would have happened if he didn't turn out the way he did? What could have happened to him?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. So that's even kind of another layer of personal history that you're bringing into this fictional story. Tell us about Arya. What kind of a person is she? And like like how is she kind of investigating this crime? I love kind of like the dual timeline. Like I do that with my books too, where you have like a topical crime and then you peel back layers and layers, and then you finally realize on the bottom layer, like what it's really all about. So tell me about her.
Yeah, so I got tired of writing about women who were overcoming horrible trauma. All my so many of my protagonists, and I don't laugh. I mean, it's not funny in that they're dealing with trauma, but I just thought I'm going to go back to killing people because I just don't want to write another protagonist who's just a wreck.
Yeah.
So Aria is 50, and so my children are in their 50s, they're early 50s, and I wanted somebody who was raised in a good home, who had love, who had good parents, and but something terrible happened to her. She's at 50, she's a widow,
Hmm.
and she's a good person. She's trying hard to run a not-for-profit. So all of my career was in the not-for-profit world,
Mhm.
and uh, and her not-for-profit, the way station, does the things I care about the most, helping people, giving people showers and food and homework help and all of that. And so I just wanted this well-adjusted but young, beautiful widow to be the main character who's going to guide this. And she has two men who are in love with her, and and so they help her. She's not solving this all by herself, but she feels like she owes Cal. She feels like she owes Cal. Plus, the murderer saw her, and she saw the murderer, and with a mask on, and he threatens her. So
Hmm.
she has a very strong reason why she needs to. He threatens her family. She has a son in college, away at college. Now she's afraid for him. So she's got a lot of things driving her, but she has this detective, and then she has Jax. I love Jax. And so, and Jax is so in love with her, but
Hmm.
he is, according to Arya, Jax is too tall. Arya's 5'2", and he's 6'2", and she can't imagine how people with a foot difference in height could possibly have sex. Like, how does that work? I can't even. What does he do? He lit them up. She's having this conversation with her best friend. Like, how does that work? So he's too tall. He's too rich because he's a donor to her not-for-profit. She's like, I can just see the newspapers, CEO canoodling with wealthy donors. She says this would just kill my reputation.
Huh?
He's too white. Arya is black and Jax is white. and she's never dated a white man before. Well, she's never dated anybody because she's been married forever. And finally, it might be too soon
Mm,
because Ben has only been dead for 2 years and she still feels married. She still looks at her ring, but, but Jack's, and then Glover, the detective, he's more interested in her than she's interested in him.
mhm.
But Jax is just, I had a friend, can I just tell you this real quick?
Yeah.
I had a friend who he's reading the book and he's writing me on LinkedIn. And he says, Aaron, I'm getting on a plane and I'm on chapter blah, blah, blah. Can I just tell you, if you do anything bad to my man Jax, if you do anything bad, you're always killing people. I'm just telling you. Then I get the next day, I get one. Okay, I just landed and Jax seems okay, but man, what you did to Wally, that was cold. So he does this running commentary.
So this,
That does my heart good because it means the characters are real.
yeah, they're reaching your readers. I mean, that's what we're supposed to be doing. I mean, like any art, think like step back a little bit. Any kind of art is its job is to wake us up. That's one of the reasons why I love abstract art, abstract expressionism. I mean, like it might be kind of confounding to look at, but it activates something in my brain, and that's what any kind of art is supposed to do. And so, like your readers, they care about these characters. I mean, so now I can't wait to read more of your book and read Jack's. I want to experience him. But that's funny what you said about um, him kind of like not putting a check in any of Arya's boxes.
Yes.
He's too tall, he's too rich. I mean, so that's so interesting just from a human interpersonal standpoint because love makes its own rules. I mean, we don't decide who we're going to fall in love with. It's decided right here and like we're only told about it after. I mean, like you don't consciously decide that. I mean, so I can't wait to read about their relationship. Yeah, it sounds like this book has a lot of richness in it. It has the interpersonal tension. It also has political history, and it has kind of a murder investigation in there as well. So I think the setup sounds amazing. Tell me about the book that's coming out in October, the kind of revivification of your earlier books. I'm excited to hear more about those.
Yes. Oh, Kara and Alex started talking to me again after all these years. But they weren't talking about the first book. They were talking about what happened afterwards. These are two half sisters. I write multi-generational and multiracial books. And so these are two women, Kara and Alex. They're both 30 years old. Alex grew up in dysfunctional privilege. Alex is white. She's her father, she has two sisters, and her father is a philanderer. And he got this young Black woman. They got pregnant together, and she had Kara, but she died.
Mm,
And Kara ends up in foster care and in a very bad, bad situation. So the book opens on the eve of their father, and she doesn't know, they've never met each other, they don't know each other. And on the eve of the father's death, he has a massive heart attack. And he summons Alex to his bed and he says, I don't want to die until I make things right. I need you to find this child that I abandoned.
mm,
And Alex is like, what? What? You gonna do what? I'm a detective. Like, what are you talking about? And he says, no, I want you to find her and to persuade her. Um, and
mm,
if you go as my ambassador and bring her to me, I want to make things right. And so the original story, which is reimagined now as a psychological thriller, is about the life that Kara was living and all that's going on in her life, with all the repercussions of abuse and abandonment and all of those things, making wrong choices about who the men are in her life because she's damaged. And Alex, with her crazy mom and her absent father and her two sisters that she's had to take care of all of her life, even though they're just a few years younger than she is, what's happening in their lives, and then they come together, and what happens as they go forward.
Mm.
And so I'm rewriting it, which was so fun, Lisa. Like, it just, and new scenes came and new characters came. And because what the ladies wanted me to do is write the sequel.
Mm.
What Kara and Alex asked me to do was say what happened afterwards. So the sequel takes place 8 months
Hmm.
after the father dies, after the death of their father, and kind of what happens. And it starts out with bang, starts out with excitement,
Right.
and we're off and running. But that one doesn't come out until next year. But this one comes out October 15th. The reimagined, rewritten, getting it right,
And the original version was published when?
2017.
2017. Okay. All right. So, wow, that's exciting. I noticed that most of your books are about loss, and I think that's such a universal challenge and struggle, and it's such a wonderful kind of layer to add to an otherwise like action-filled, high-octane, thriller, because you're showing what happens like underneath the waterline if you look at like an iceberg. I mean, like loss eats away at us. And a lot of times we're not ready to go back down there and kind of unpack it and talk about how we feel because it's painful and we're trying to avoid pain. And how do we avoid pain? By pretending it's not there and moving forward. I mean, that's just kind of the human condition. But I think loss can really give readers a lot of insight into characters. I mean, like what I like to do in my books is not just tell an exciting story. I want to create a character that they'll never forget. I want to make the character memorable. And I think we can do that by creating that psychological depth by kind of the broken parts of their of
Yeah,
their
all the broken parts of their lives. Exactly right. All of my books feature women uh, as flawed, relatable, regular women who have suffered loss and trauma but are making their way. I used to get so upset watching the television or a movie where the killer is somebody who was sexually abused or some other trauma happened. So that was the reason they became a killer. And it would infuriate me because, yes, I'm sure lots of murderers had terrible things happen to them, but all the people who got abused, all the people who have trauma, we're not out there killing people.
right.
And you would think we were. You would think that one thing leads to the other. And so I try to write about women who are overcoming big, big obstacles, emotional obstacles, all kinds of obstacles, and yet are having relationships and they have children. They're making their way in the world. They make mistakes, they make bad decisions. In Reckonings, um, while I was writing it, I would get angry at Roxy. I'd say, really? Really? Is that what you're going to do? Don't you see there's nothing news going that direction?
Oh, funny. Well, your creative juices have a lot of flow and energy to them, and that really comes across in your book. So I'm so excited to be here, kind of digging beneath the surface of you, the visionary, but behind them. Tell me about your podcast. That's another aspect of your creative life, where you're lifting up other authors. How did you get the idea to do that, and how did that start?
So Tangled Lies was came out the year of COVID, and there were no events. I know you remember this. That there was no place to sell your books. There was no, and I thought that must be true for all my fellow writers. They're suffering like I am. So I just decided to start a podcast because I spent my career speaking in front of large groups. The largest group I ever spoke in front of was 1,000 people, and to people, from, as I said, 5 continents, so all kinds of people. So I thought I would lead into my strengths, and I would just start a video podcast and interview authors. So now we're 5 years old. It's called What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? And it's over 300 episodes. I've never missed in those 5 years. I've never missed one week. Many times I have two in a week because
Wow.
I try to help people with on their publication day, and
Mhm.
so you end up doing more. But it's been a joy. Oh, Lisa, I have met. Well, because this is what you're doing. You meet such cool people, and there's something so generous about the writing community.
Yeah.
How much we help each other and support each other, and as you are doing, helping your fellow writers.
Mhm.
So it was fun. I love, love, love what I've done, and I ended up reading books I wouldn't have read,
Mhm.
because it wasn't my genre. It wasn't, I didn't think I was interested in. And then I meet this author, and this book sounds so great. And so I add it to my, to be read list. So
Mhm.
I love the podcast. It comes on every week. What are you reading? What are you writing? It's 20 minutes. It's also on audio on Spotify and on, Apple
Awesome.
Podcast. And yeah.
Wow, that's ambitious every week. Wow, that's awesome. I will put the link of that in the notes so that people listening to this can find that. So let's talk about the publishing industry now. Look back at when you first came to the publishing industry, when your first book was published, and now it's changed so much, even just in the last 5 years. Yes, I know that COVID was, it really shook up like everything for writers and for publishers. Like how do you feel about the publishing landscape right now in 2026 in terms of the opportunities for authors and the challenges?
I'm so concerned about it. But, first of all, getting published it was hard no matter when. It was hard. I had 78 rejections for Tangled Lies. 78 rejections. So you have to be, you got to put your big girl pants on. You gotta be okay, because the 79th yes turned out to be amazing and wonderful. And 1 year later, my publisher said, "Do you have another book?"
Mm,
So that got me, on my way. But now I look at folks struggling now because of so much consolidation in the publishing business. The big ones are eating the little ones. There are fewer and fewer um, publishing houses. AI is such a threat, such an incredible threat. I have a dear friend whose book came out last August, and within 3 weeks, there was an AI version of it up on Amazon.
oh my goodness.
There's her book. There's an AI version of her book using the same title, um, selling for less than her book was selling. And it was just because her publicist, she could afford a publicist, and so her publicist found it and got Amazon to take it down. So writers are up against a lot. And then so few of us sell more than 2,000 books.
Mhm.
Even if you're lucky enough to get published, or you choose a hybrid or self-published, however you choose to get published, God bless everybody. We've got our work out there, whatever that way, that method is.
Mhm.
But like something like 10% or 5%, I forget, some little percentage of authors ever even sell 2,000 books. So it's you have to do it because it's in your heart.
Right.
You have to do it because you love it. You have to do it because your characters are demanding it. Your muse is pushing you, whatever it is, because it's not an easy business, but it is a joyful. Opening up a box of new books, like you know,
There's
looking at a new cover.
oh
Yeah.
no. There's nothing like that, opening the first box, except one time I opened it and one of the pages was upside down and one of the covers had gotten glued to the top of the box and I just wanted to cry. I mean, that only happened,
Yeah.
but yeah, so it,
Yes.
yeah. Um, what would you tell a novice writer who knew that she had a book in her but didn't know how to like start and didn't know how to get that flow going?
Writers write. If you have to write, you have to find the time. My son, who's running a company and has a family, he promises himself 15 minutes a day. And
Mm-hmm.
he will write, that's his minimum. Some days that's all he can write.
Mm-hmm.
Some days he can write more. When he's on the road and he can write more, but he promises himself 15 minutes a day. You can't, if you're still just thinking about it, you gotta write, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's junk. It doesn't matter if it doesn't come out the way you want.
Mm-hmm.
Write. And then writers read. And we both, we learn so much, right, Lisa? We learn so much from reading
Oh, yeah.
other people's books. And sometimes, there's a plot thing that you're just having trouble with, and you're reading for pleasure, and like, it's the answer.
Mhm.
That's the answer. That'll work in my book. So that's the first thing, start writing. Give yourself, you can't promise yourself 15 minutes, give yourself 10 minutes.
Mhm.
Everybody can find 10 minutes
Mhm.
and let the words flow. And then the third thing I would just say, the last thing I would just say, I have a blog post of 13 things that you should do if you want to become an author. But the third one that I think is super important is study your craft.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, you have to, as writers, even with 5 books out, and I know people with 9 books out, and they're learning all the time.
That's right.
They're trying to improve their craft all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So study.
Mm-hmm. That's great advice. Write, read, and study your craft. And I love your son's 15-minute kind of minimum benchmark. For someone who has a demanding day job, I love that because it's a small enough bite where you can do it on a plane. You can do it in a hospital waiting room. You can do it on your phone, just on the notes application or something, but still devoting that intentional 15 minutes a day to what you know will eventually be a book. And I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Robert Osborne Jr.
oh, okay. That's your son. Okay.
He's a literary writer with short stories, and he puts out probably about 3 literary magazines a year. Pick him up, two to
Oh,
three. And when you think there's like 10,000 people applying to those magazines,
right.
he's pretty impressive.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, an impressive family, it sounds like. That's awesome. All right, so people can find your book, Justice for Emerson, on Amazon and from all online retailers.
Every place that you go, you can go to your library. If you don't see it on the shelf, ask them. You can go to your local independent bookstore. If you don't see it, ask. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, and I'll also put your website in the notes of this conversation too. Thank you so much, Karen. It's been so lovely to talk to you and hear about your process. And listeners, this is Karen E. Osborne talking about her book Justice for Emerson and her interesting life and all of the layers she puts into her books. And thanks for listening to Story Impact, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you, Lisa.